I never thought my life would turn into something out of a crime thriller. If you asked me a year ago what my greatest fear was, I would have said losing a partner in the line of duty. Every officer carries that weight, knowing that one day, a routine call might not be routine at all. But I was always comforted by the thought that when I came home, my wife, Emily, would be there waiting for me. She was my peace in a world of chaos, the steady presence that made the madness of my job bearable. We had been married for 7 years, built a home together, and settled into what I believed was a strong, unshakable partnership. Emily was the kind of woman who could light up a room without trying. She had this effortless grace about her, a warmth that made people feel safe. She had been a teacher when we first met, but a few years into our marriage, she shifted to freelance writing, preferring to work from home. I loved that about her. She wanted freedom, a space to create, and I wanted to provide that for her. Our life together had a rhythm, one I found comfort in. I worked long hours, sometimes pulling double shifts, but I never complained. The city had its fair share of criminals, and I took pride in being one of the men who stood between them and the innocent. It meant missing birthdays, anniversaries, and quiet dinners, but I always believed Emily understood. She knew the job, accepted the sacrifices, and supported me in a way only a true partner could. Or so I thought. Lately, I had been feeling a strange distance between us. At first, I chalked it up to routine, the way long-term relationships sometimes slip into autopilot. I was exhausted more often than not, and she seemed preoccupied with her work. But even in those quiet moments together, when she sat next to me on the couch, when we ate dinner in our usual spots, there was something different. She wasn't fully there. I'd catch her staring off into the distance, her phone never too far from her grasp. It was subtle, easy to dismiss. A missed call here, a text left unanswered a little too long. But in my line of work, you learn to trust your gut, and my gut was telling me something wasn't right. I should have listened sooner. I tried to push the doubts aside, convincing myself that I was just being paranoid. My job had conditioned me to be suspicious, always looking for angles, inconsistencies, and small details that didn't add up. But I didn't want to bring that mindset into my marriage. I told myself that whatever distance I felt was just life, stress, routine, the natural ebb and flow of a long-term relationship. I worked long hours, took overtime when I could, and Emily had always been independent. Maybe this was just a phase, a lull in conversation, a temporary disconnect that would fix itself over time. But little things started to nag at me, small moments that didn't sit right. She was distracted, constantly on her phone, and not in the way she used to be. Emily was never the type to be glued to a screen, yet now it was always within reach, always face down on the table or tucked into her lap. If I walked into a room, she would subtly angle herself away or lock the screen with an ease that felt practiced. Conversations that used to flow naturally between us had become stilted, her responses clipped, her attention elsewhere. "Just tired," she'd say. "Busy with work." It was an easy excuse, one that I had no reason to challenge outright. But I started to notice a pattern. Her nights at her desk became more frequent, and when I came home, the glow of her computer screen often cast long shadows against the bedroom walls. She had always been a night owl, preferring the quiet hours to write, but this felt different. The way she would stiffen when I walked into the room, the way she would quickly close tabs or shift her posture like she had something to hide. It was small, almost imperceptible, but I noticed. My instincts, the same ones that kept me alive on the job, told me something wasn't right. One night, I came home later than usual. The house was quiet except for the soft hum of her voice coming from our bedroom. At first, I thought she was on a work call, but as I got closer, I recognized the tone. She was laughing, soft and hushed, the kind of laughter meant for private conversations. I stopped just outside the door, listening. It wasn't the casual laughter of someone telling a joke. It was intimate, subdued, filled with warmth. Then, silence. A silence that felt deliberate, like she knew I was home. I pushed open the door to find her sitting on the bed, phone in hand, screen already dark. Her expression flickered. Something unreadable passed over her face before she forced a smile. "You're home early," she said, her voice light, but the tension in her posture betrayed her. I nodded, studying her carefully, reading her body language the way I would a suspect in an interrogation. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my tone even. There was a hesitation, so brief it might have been missed by anyone else, but I saw it. A second too long before her forced smile returned. "Just a friend from my writing group," she said casually. "We were brainstorming ideas." The lie was effortless, smooth, as if rehearsed. I wanted to believe her, wanted to convince myself that I was overthinking, but the doubt had already taken root. I let it go, not because I believed her, but because I wasn't ready to admit that my wife might be lying to me. But the cracks were forming, and no matter how much I tried to ignore them, I couldn't unsee them. The feeling that something was wrong settled deep in my gut, a slow-growing sickness I couldn't shake. In my line of work, instincts were everything. They kept me alive on the streets, helped me read people, and alerted me when something didn't add up. I had learned to trust those instincts, to follow the little details that didn't make sense because they always led to the truth. And yet, when it came to Emily, I hesitated. I wanted so badly to believe that she was just stressed, that my paranoia was a result of exhaustion from long shifts and sleepless nights. But doubt has a way of creeping in, spreading like a slow poison, impossible to ignore once it takes hold. I started paying attention in a way I never had before. I noted the way her demeanor changed when she thought I wasn't looking, how she checked her phone with a quick glance, and the way she positioned herself so that I couldn't see the screen. She had never cared about her notifications before, but now she seemed hyper-aware of them. The nights she worked late at her desk stretched longer, her excuses vague, her words carefully chosen. "Just finishing up a deadline," she'd say. I lost track of time. At first, I accepted it. But then came the nights when I would wake up and find the other side of the bed cold, the house silent except for the faint sound of her voice from another room. One evening, I came home earlier than expected. I was supposed to work a double shift, but a last-minute schedule change gave me the night off. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed that the downstairs lights were off, but the faint glow of our bedroom window told me she was still awake. I walked in quietly, my footsteps careful, and listened. At first, all I could hear was the hum of the heating system, the soft creaks of the house settling. Then, just as I reached the bottom of the stairs, I heard her voice, low, almost a whisper. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. I moved up the stairs slowly, the way I had countless times before when approaching a suspect's hideout. My breathing slowed, my pulse steady, my mind already processing what I was about to walk into. I stood outside the bedroom door, waiting, listening. Then, silence. The unmistakable sound of a phone screen locking. When I pushed the door open, Emily was sitting on the edge of the bed, her phone resting on her thigh. Her expression was carefully composed, but I caught the flicker of unease in her eyes before she masked it. "You're home early," she said, her voice light, but the tension in her posture betrayed her. I nodded, studying her carefully, reading her body language the way I would a suspect in an interrogation. "Who were you talking to?" I asked, keeping my voice even. She hesitated. It was brief, but it was enough. "Just one of the writers from my group," she said, her tone casual but too controlled. "We were going over some ideas." It was the same excuse as before, the same easy lie. But now, I wasn't just suspicious. Now, I knew. I nodded slowly, forcing myself to look away, to pretend I hadn't noticed the tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers curled slightly, as if resisting the urge to move her phone out of sight. "All right," I said, stripping off my jacket. "I'm going to grab a shower." I turned away before I could see the relief in her expression, before she could sense just how much I didn't believe her. As the water ran over me, I stared at the tiled wall, my thoughts racing. I had faced criminals, murderers, liars of all kinds. I had interrogated men who had spent years perfecting deception, yet here I was, standing under scalding water, realizing that I had been blind to the one person I had trusted most. I needed to know the truth. I needed proof. And if there was one thing I had learned as a cop, it was that the truth always came out. It was only a matter of time. The weight of suspicion pressed down on me, suffocating in its quiet persistence. I had spent my entire career exposing lies, unraveling alibis, and chasing criminals who thought they could outsmart the law. I could tell when someone was hiding something. It was in the way they spoke, the hesitation before answering, the small but telling shift in body language when faced with a direct question. I had seen it all before, but I never expected to see it in my own home, in my own wife. The truth was there, lurking beneath her carefully chosen words and deflecting smiles, waiting for me to find it. And I would. I started with small tests. The next time she was in the shower, I picked up her phone. Locked, of course. That wasn't unusual. We both had passcodes. But it was the change in her behavior that confirmed my fears. Emily had never been secretive about her phone before. She would leave it on the kitchen counter, on the coffee table, anywhere. Now, it was always with her, always turned face down. And if she left it unattended, she would return for it almost immediately. One night, as she slept, I reached for it again, carefully pressing her thumb against the screen to unlock it, but she had changed the settings. A 6-digit code now stood between me and the truth. My stomach twisted. She was hiding something, and hiding it well. My mind raced with possibilities, each one worse than the last. I told myself that maybe I was overreacting, that maybe it wasn't what I thought. But I had seen these patterns before. In unfaithful spouses I had interviewed, in criminals who thought they could outsmart the police. They always thought they were careful, but there were always cracks in the story, little details they couldn't cover up completely. I just had to find them. The next day, I started checking our home more carefully, looking for anything that felt out of place. Her laptop was off limits. I had tried to glance at it once, and she had shut it down so fast I barely had time to register what was on the screen. But there were other ways. I checked our shared calendar, the small notebook she sometimes left by the couch, the receipts she left in her purse. That's when I found it. A receipt from a hotel downtown. 2 nights ago. My blood ran cold as I stared at it. It wasn't a work-related stay. She had no reason to be there. The timestamp showed late evening, during a night I had worked a double shift. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm, to push down the rage boiling in my chest. I had spent years learning how to control my emotions under pressure. I had faced men who had done unspeakable things, and I had never let my anger get the best of me. I wouldn't now. Not yet. Instead, I put the receipt back exactly where I found it and walked out of the house, my thoughts a storm of fury and disbelief. I needed to be sure before I confronted her. I needed proof, undeniable, irrefutable proof. Because when I finally exposed her, there would be no excuses, no lies, no way for her to talk her way out of it. I had caught criminals in the act before. This time would be no different. And so, I started planning. The hotel receipt burned in my mind, the evidence I needed to confirm what my instincts had been screaming at me for weeks. There was no logical explanation, no innocent reason for Emily to be at a hotel that night, not when she had told me she was home. My gut told me this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern, one that had gone unnoticed because I had trusted her. Trust. It felt like such a naive, foolish thing now. I had spent my career teaching rookies that trust had to be earned. Yet I had blindly given mine to the one person who didn't deserve it. I knew I couldn't confront her yet. If I did, she would lie, spin a story, gaslight me into questioning my own suspicions. I had seen it happen too many times in domestic disputes. People always tried to manipulate the narrative, especially when they knew they were guilty. No, I needed something irrefutable, something she couldn't deny. I needed to catch her in the act. I started paying closer attention to her routines, looking for patterns, inconsistencies, anything that would tell me when she was slipping away. I made excuses to leave work at unexpected times, coming home at odd hours to see if she was where she claimed to be. Sometimes she was. Sometimes she wasn't. And when she wasn't, her excuses were always the same. Errands, meetings, coffee with a friend. The lies came so easily to her now, spoken with a casualness that made my stomach turn. Then, I got my break. One evening, I told Emily I had been called in for an overnight shift. It wasn't unusual. Being a cop meant long, unpredictable hours. She barely reacted, just gave me a quick kiss and a distracted, "Be safe." Before going back to her laptop, I watched her carefully, waiting for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of guilt. but she played it perfectly. Too perfectly. I left the house and parked a few blocks away, waiting. The hours dragged, tension coiling in my chest like a spring wound too tight. Then, just past midnight, the lights in our bedroom went off, and minutes later, she slipped out the front door. She was dressed casually, a small bag slung over her shoulder. Not the kind of bag you'd take to meet a friend for coffee. The kind you'd take when you plan to spend the night elsewhere. I followed her. She drove with confidence, no hesitation in her route, no signs of second-guessing. She had done this before. That realization hit me harder than I expected. She knew exactly where she was going, where to park, how to move unnoticed. It was methodical, practiced, and that meant I had been blind for a long time. She pulled into a familiar location, the same hotel from the receipt. My grip tightened on the steering wheel as I watched her walk inside without looking back. My wife. The woman I had built a life with, the woman I had trusted above all others, disappearing through the doors of a hotel to meet someone else. I forced myself to stay calm, to push down the rage that threatened to take over. I was a cop. I needed to act like one. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about catching her and making sure she paid for it. The hotel doors closed behind her, sealing her inside a world she thought was hidden from me. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My heart pounded, but not from sadness. That emotion had burned away, leaving only cold, calculating purpose. She had been doing this for a while. The ease with which she slipped into her deception told me that this wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern, a life she had built alongside the one we shared. My wife was a liar, a fraud, and now, she was going to face the consequences. I didn't move right away. Instead, I sat there, thinking, strategizing, making sure I didn't let emotions dictate my next move. I had seen too many men lose control in moments like this. The ones who went into blind rages, who let their fury lead them to irreversible decisions. I refused to be that kind of man. I wasn't going to let her turn me into something I wasn't. Instead, I did what I did best. I gathered evidence. I stepped out of my car, pulling up my hood to blend into the late-night crowd outside the hotel. The lobby was dimly lit, the kind of place that catered to discretion, to people who wanted to move unseen. I knew how these places worked. Cash payments, no names, no questions. It was a place designed for secrecy, but she had underestimated who she was up against. Inside, I kept my distance, moving like a shadow, blending into the background. I had no intention of confronting her yet. I wanted to see who she was meeting. It didn't take long. The elevator doors opened, and from my vantage point behind a column, I saw him. My stomach dropped. The man who stepped out wasn't just some random affair partner. He wasn't some stranger she had met online or a coworker she had grown too close to. He was someone I knew. Someone the entire department had been hunting for over a year. Tyler Grant. A fugitive. A wanted man. A ghost we had been chasing through the city's underworld. Always one step behind. Slipping through our grasp time and time again. Armed robbery. Assault. Drug trafficking. He had a record longer than some of the cases I had worked in my career. And now, my wife was meeting him in a hotel. My mind raced, processing the implications at lightning speed. This wasn't just an affair. This was something bigger. Something darker. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was involved with a criminal, a man I had personally investigated. My life, my marriage, my job, all of it had just collided in the worst possible way. I forced myself to breathe, to keep my expression neutral as I turned and walked calmly out of the hotel. There was no more doubt, no more room for hesitation. Emily had made her choice, and now it was my turn. I walked out of the hotel into the cold night air, my mind moving faster than it ever had before. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It wasn't just about my wife lying to me, sneaking around behind my back, throwing away everything we had built. She wasn't just a cheater. She was a criminal's accomplice, a wanted man's lover. The very person I had sworn to protect the city from was the same man she had been sneaking off to see. The weight of that realization pressed down on me, but I didn't let it break me. I wasn't broken. Not yet. I got back in my car and sat there, staring at the hotel's entrance. The rage simmered beneath the surface, but I forced myself to remain calm. The old me, the husband, the man who still cared, would have stormed in there and demanded answers. But that man was dead. What remained was the officer, the strategist, the hunter who had spent his life tracking men like Tyler Grant. If Emily thought she could keep this a secret, she had underestimated me. The pieces were falling into place now. Emily's secrecy, the way she had suddenly started pulling away from me, the excuses, the lies. I thought it had been a simple affair, that she had fallen into the arms of some nobody who made her feel something I couldn't anymore. But this was worse. This was deliberate. She had chosen him, a fugitive, a man the police had been hunting for over a year. And she had done it knowing who I was, knowing that if I ever found out, it would destroy everything. I exhaled slowly, forcing my heartbeat to steady. I had options. I could walk away, pretend I never saw this, let her live with the consequences of her choices when the law finally caught up with him. But that wasn't good enough. She had made a fool out of me, turned my marriage into a lie, and now she was harboring a criminal right under my nose. No, I wouldn't just walk away. I started the car and pulled out of the lot, heading home. I needed to plan my next move carefully. If I played this right, I could take them both down in one swift motion. I could destroy everything they had built together, just like she had done to me. I thought about calling it in right then, sending in a team to storm the hotel, but I didn't want to risk losing him again. Tyler was slippery, always a step ahead. And Emily, she was smart in her own way. She would see my hand coming if I played it too early. No, I needed to set the trap. I drove home, the house feeling like a foreign place now. This wasn't my home anymore. It was just another crime scene, filled with memories that meant nothing now. I looked around at the framed photos on the walls, at the life we had built, and I felt nothing. The love, the warmth, the trust. It had all been gutted. Emily didn't know I had seen her. She had no idea that I knew where she was, who she was with. That was my advantage, and I planned to use it. I sat down at the kitchen table, pulled out my phone, and started making arrangements. This was going to end on my terms. I wasn't going to let her explain, let her cry, let her manipulate her way out of it. She had chosen her side. Now, I was going to make sure she paid for it. The storm was coming, and I was going to make damn sure she never saw it until it was too late. I barely slept. I didn't need to. My mind was sharper than it had ever been, focused on one single goal, bringing this entire thing crashing down on Emily and the man she had chosen over me. Every move I had made in my career, every arrest, every operation, had led to this moment. I knew how to catch criminals. I knew how to take down liars. And now, I was going to use every skill I had to destroy the woman who had betrayed me. By morning, I had a plan. Emily still didn't know that I had seen her at the hotel. She would come home like nothing had happened, slipping back into the role of the devoted wife, thinking she was fooling me. But I had already put the pieces in motion. I had contacted a few trusted officers from my precinct, men who had been on the hunt for Tyler Grant as long as I had. I fed them just enough information to set things in motion. A location, a time frame, a possible sighting of our fugitive. I didn't mention Emily. Not yet. That part would come later. When Emily finally walked through the front door that morning, her expression was casual, too casual. She smiled, stretching as if she had just woken up, but I saw the way she hesitated before meeting my eyes. "Morning," she said lightly, heading toward the kitchen. I studied her, silent, letting the moment stretch between us. She was good at lying, but I had spent my life reading people, and I saw the way her fingers twitched slightly as she reached for the coffee maker. She was nervous. She was wondering if I suspected anything. I decided to play my role a little longer. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice neutral. "How was your night?" She barely missed a beat. "Oh, just the usual. Watched a few episodes of that show I told you about. Fell asleep early." She turned, smiling, as if everything was normal. As if she hadn't spent the night in a hotel room with a wanted criminal. I nodded, filing that lie away with the others. "That's good." I let her believe she was safe. For the rest of the day, I played my part perfectly. I left for work as usual, knowing she would think she had gotten away with it. I could almost imagine her messaging Tyler, reassuring him that nothing was wrong, that I didn't suspect a thing. But I wasn't at the station. I was across the street from the hotel, waiting. I had tipped off my team that there would be movement that evening. A raid had already been authorized. Tyler Grant was going down tonight. And Emily? She was going to be right there with him when it happened. Hours passed, and then I saw her. Emily arrived just after sunset, dressed casually but with an air of excitement, the same way she used to look when she was meeting me for a date night. It made my stomach turn. She walked through the hotel entrance without hesitation, confident, unaware that her world was about to shatter. I gave the signal. Minutes later, the operation was in motion. Officers moved in through the front and back exits, coordinated and precise. I didn't go in right away. I wanted to give her time, to let her get comfortable, to let her think she had won. Then, when the moment was right, I entered with the team. The door to the hotel room was kicked open. The chaos was immediate, shouting, weapons drawn. Tyler's face contorted in shock as he scrambled to react. But it was Emily's reaction I was waiting for. She turned toward the door, eyes wide, her face draining of color as she took in the sight of uniformed officers swarming the room. And then her gaze found mine. For a split second, time seemed to freeze. I saw the realization dawn in her eyes. The moment she understood that I had set her up, that I had been playing her just as she had played me. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Tyler lunged, but he never had a chance. He was on the ground in seconds, pinned, restrained, the fight already lost. The officers moved efficiently, securing him, reading him his rights. And Emily? She was still standing there, trembling, too stunned to move. I stepped forward, towering over her, my voice cold, steady. Surprised to see me? She finally found her voice, but it was nothing more than a whisper. You knew? I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Of course I knew. Her eyes darted around, looking for an escape, but there wasn't one. She had made her choice. Now, she was going to live with the consequences. Emily stood frozen in place, her face pale, her breath uneven. Her eyes flicked between me and the officers pinning Tyler to the ground. Her mind desperately trying to process how everything had fallen apart so quickly. The shock in her expression was satisfying in a way I never thought possible. She had spent months, maybe longer, deceiving me, lying to my face, sneaking behind my back. And now, she was watching everything crumble around her, powerless to stop it. Tyler was still resisting, cursing and thrashing under the weight of the officers holding him down, but it was pointless. He had spent the past year slipping through our fingers, always one step ahead. Not this time. This time, he had walked right into a trap of his own making. He looked up at me, his lip curled in defiance, but there was something else in his eyes, recognition. "You son of a bitch," he spat, his voice thick with hatred. "This was you." I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He already knew. I just stared down at him, my expression unreadable, as he was yanked to his feet and cuffed. His arrest had been a long time coming, and I had imagined this moment 100 times. But I never thought my own wife would be standing in the middle of it, caught in the crossfire. Emily finally found her voice, stepping toward me, her hands shaking. "Please," she whispered, "I can explain." I turned to face her, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt nothing. No sadness, no anger, no love, just a cold, hollow indifference. "Explain?" I repeated, tilting my head slightly. "Explain what, Emily? That you've been lying to me for months? That you've been sneaking off to sleep with a fugitive? That you've been helping a man I've been trying to put behind bars?" I let out a quiet, humorless laugh. "No, I don't think you can explain this. And even if you could, I don't care." Her eyes filled with tears, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she choked out. "I never wanted." "You never wanted to get caught," I cut in, my voice as sharp as a blade. "That's what you mean, right? You would have kept lying, kept sneaking around, as long as I didn't find out. But I did, Emily. And now, this is your reality." The officers were already moving Tyler out of the room, shoving him down the hallway, his curses echoing in the air. Emily flinched at the sound, as if realizing, too late, just how deeply she was tied to him. I could see it in her eyes, the panic, the dawning horror that this was real, that she had lost. She reached for me then, her fingers brushing against my arm in a desperate plea. Please, we can fix this. You have to believe me. I pulled away from her touch as if it burned. Fix this, I repeated, my voice quiet but firm. There's nothing left to fix. You made your choice. And now, you get to live with it. Her tears spilled over then, silent and slow, but I felt nothing. Not sympathy, not regret, just a cold satisfaction. I had given her everything. I had loved her, trusted her, built a life with her. And she had thrown it all away for a man who would have left her behind the second things got too dangerous. She sobbed, shaking her head, but I didn't stay to watch. I turned and walked away, leaving her there in the middle of that cheap hotel room, surrounded by the wreckage of her own choices. By the time I stepped outside, the night air hit me like a wave, crisp and cold, washing away the last remnants of the man I had been before this. The officers had already loaded Tyler into the car, the red and blue lights flashing across his face. I met his gaze for a brief moment, and this time, he wasn't defiant. He knew he was finished. So was Emily, and I was finally free. I drove home in silence, the flashing lights of the arrest still burned into my vision, the sound of Emily's voice begging me for a second chance ringing in my ears. But it didn't affect me, not in the way she wanted it to. She had spent months lying to my face, deceiving me, and betraying everything we had built together. Her regret meant nothing. Her tears meant nothing. She had made her choice, and now, she would lose everything. The house felt different when I walked inside. It wasn't home anymore. It was just a structure filled with memories that had been tainted by her deception. The framed photos on the walls, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air, the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was all an illusion, a lie I had lived in for too long. But that ended tonight. I sat down at the kitchen table, opened my laptop, and began the process of erasing her from my life. The divorce papers were already being prepared. I had called my lawyer the moment I confirmed the affair. He knew the situation, knew that I wanted this to be swift and merciless. I wasn't going to give her time to plead or beg. She didn't deserve it. Next, I emptied our joint bank account. Everything I had earned, everything I had worked for. I transferred it to a private account in my name. Emily had no claim to it. She had never contributed, had never worked for what I had built. She had spent her time playing house while sneaking off to be with a fugitive. She had no right to a single cent. Then, I changed the locks. She had no idea that while she was betraying me, I had been preparing for this moment. A locksmith had come by earlier in the week, replacing every lock in the house. The moment she stepped foot on the porch, she would realize she had no way back in. I leaned back in my chair, letting out a slow breath. It was all coming together. Every thread of her life was being pulled apart. Every lie she had told was crumbling beneath her. She thought she could live two lives, that she could keep me in the dark forever. But she had underestimated me. She had forgotten that I wasn't just her husband. I was a cop, and I always caught my targets. Hours passed, and then my phone buzzed. I knew who it was before I even looked. Emily. She had probably been released after questioning, confused, desperate, trying to piece together what had happened. She had no idea that I had orchestrated the entire thing, that I had let her walk straight into her own downfall. I let the call ring out. Then came another, and another. Then the messages. Emily, please, pick up. Emily, I don't know what's happening. Emily, I need to talk to you. Emily, please, I'm scared. I stared at the screen, my expression cold, unreadable. Good. She should be scared. The messages kept coming, each one more desperate than the last. She begged. She pleaded. She swore that it wasn't what I thought, that she had made a mistake, that we could fix this. But I didn't respond. She didn't deserve an explanation. She didn't deserve closure. I went to bed that night with my phone buzzing on the nightstand, the sounds of her desperation filling the silence. But I slept better than I had in months. She was finally feeling what I had felt, and I wasn't done yet. Morning came, cold and quiet, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of Emily's lies, her betrayal, her deceit, it was all gone. She had spent months sneaking behind my back, laughing in the arms of another man, believing she would never get caught. Now, she was alone, panicked, watching everything she had built with me collapse around her. I had no sympathy, no mercy. By the time I got out of bed, my phone was still vibrating every few minutes. Missed calls, more messages. Emily was unraveling, desperate to reach me, to explain, to plead. I scrolled through them, my expression cold. Emily, I don't understand. Why won't you talk to me? Emily, I know I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Emily, you're my husband. Please, just talk to me. Emily, why is my key not working? Emily, are you home? Emily, please don't do this. I let her sit outside for hours. Let her feel the consequences of what she had done. She had chosen to betray me, to lie to me over and over again. Now, I had made my choice. She was nothing to me. When I finally stepped outside, she was there, sitting on the front steps, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold herself together. Her eyes were red, swollen, her face pale with exhaustion. The moment she saw me, she scrambled to her feet. I've been waiting for you, she said, her voice shaky. We need to talk. I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing. Not love, not sadness, just a dull, detached sense of finality. There's nothing to talk about, I said. She shook her head violently. No, you don't understand. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. You never wanted to hurt me? I repeated, my voice sharp. That's rich. You just wanted to screw around with a fugitive and go back to playing house when it suited you? Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. I didn't know who he was at first, she whispered. I swear. By the time I found out, I was already in too deep. I didn't know how to stop. I stepped forward, lowering my voice to a dangerous calm. You didn't know how to stop? I shook my head, disgust curling in my gut. That's the excuse you're going with? She swallowed hard, shifting on her feet. I love you, okay? I made a mistake, but I love you. I stared at her for a long moment, then smiled. It was small, cruel. No, you don't. Her breath hitched. I do. You love the life I gave you. You love the security, the stability. But me? No, Emily. You don't love me. You love what I provided. I stepped past her, unlocking the door just enough to throw something outside. A folder. She frowned, reaching down slowly. What is this? Divorce papers. My voice was calm, almost bored. Sign them. She gasped, flipping through the pages, her hands trembling. You can't just. I can, I said. And I have. The house is mine. You get nothing. No money. No assets. No second chances. I tilted my head, watching the horror settle in her features. You lost, Emily. And the best part? You did it to yourself. She shook her head, taking a step toward me. You don't have to do this. We can fix. I cut her off with a sharp glare. We are done. You were dead to me the moment you walked into that hotel room. She crumbled then, her sobs breaking through, but I didn't stay to watch. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me, shutting her out the way she had shut me out for months. I heard her calling my name, heard her begging, but I never looked back. I had caught her, exposed her, destroyed her. Now, she was nothing. And I was finally free.